What is the 100-year-old Jones Act that Trump relaxed for 60 days? In the darkness of the night, the sea is not always calm. Sometimes, it is not just ships that move over the waves, but the balance of the entire world economy that floats there. Missiles fire in the Middle East. The movement of ships around the Strait of Hormuz comes under threat. Oil prices begin to surge, and then suddenly, a 100-year-old law within America comes into the spotlight. The Jones Act. The question is, when the war is happening between Iran and Israel, why did America need to give relaxation in its own shipping law? Is this just a step to reduce fuel prices, or is there a much bigger story hidden behind it? Of national security, supply chain, election pressure, and energy panic? This is the point where an old maritime law suddenly turns into a wartime economic tool, and the world tries to understand why, as soon as the rules of the sea change, the heartbeat of the market also changes. To understand this story, it is first necessary to know what the Trump administration has actually done. In March 2026, the US government issued a 60-day waiver under the Jones Act, meaning this law was not completely removed, but a limited time relaxation was given, under which foreign-flagged vessels can move fuel, fertilizer, and related cargo on some domestic US routes. According to reports from Reuters, PBS, and Associated Press, this step was taken to reduce rising fuel prices, shipping disruptions caused by the Iran conflict, and domestic supply bottlenecks. That means technically, it is more accurate to understand this not as a permanent repeal, but as a temporary waiver or temporary suspension, an emergency response. Now the question arises, what exactly is the Jones Act? Its formal name is the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, and its Section 27 is the part commonly referred to as the Jones Act. This law was created after the First World War, so that America could maintain a strong domestic merchant marine capacity. Under this, any cargo moving between US ports must be transported on a ship that is US built, US owned, US flagged, and primarily operated by an American crew. That means if any goods have to move from New York to Puerto Rico, from Texas to Florida, or from one US port on the Gulf Coast to another US port, then under normal conditions, a foreign flagged ship cannot do that job. This restriction is the core of the Jones Act. And this is why it is considered a US coastal trade protection law. Behind this law, there was not just economics, but also security logic. For a long time, America believed that if it did not have its own shipbuilding base, trained seafarers, and domestic fleet capacity, then it would become vulnerable during war or emergency. The Jones Act was born from this very philosophy. Protect the industry in peacetime, so that national logistics can survive in wartime. That is why its supporters consider it not just protectionism, but strategic insurance. Their argument is that if domestic shipping is completely left to foreign vessels, then short-term costs may decrease. But in the long term, America's maritime self-reliance could weaken. This is the reason why, even after 100 years, this law remains part of both emotional and strategic debates in US politics. But the other side of the story is equally strong. Critics have long argued that the Jones Act increases shipping costs, reduces competition, and makes domestic coastal trade unnecessarily expensive. Especially in cases like island regions, Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and energy movement between the East Coast and Gulf Coast, this law is often seen as a cause of cost pressure. Keeping foreign ships out means that US cargo has to depend on comparatively limited and more expensive domestic fleet options. This is why whenever fuel prices rise sharply in America or supply becomes urgent after a disaster, the discussion of a Jones Act waiver begins again. This time, the Iran war has reignited the same debate. Amid the Iran conflict, this issue became so significant because the global oil market had already become unstable. According to recent reports from Reuters, Washington Post, and Al Jazeera, Middle East tensions, attacks on energy-linked sites, and disruption in the Strait of Hormuz created sharp volatility in the oil market. Some reports mentioned Brent crude reaching around $110 per barrel, while the US average gasoline price rose to about $3.84 per gallon. This is the level where fuel inflation starts directly affecting consumer politics, trucking costs, farm economics, and election sentiment. And when global crude becomes expensive, shipping is disrupted, and domestic fuel movement is also trapped in costly maritime rules. Then for the White House, a Jones Act waiver becomes an emergency lever. Here, the reference to the Hormuz Strait is very important. According to recent reporting, this choke point once again became a central risk for global oil flow. When such a large portion of the world's crude and petroleum passes through a narrow maritime route, and that same route faces conflict, mines, attacks, insurance risk, or naval disruption, then not just the Middle East, but America, Europe, and Asia all get affected. America itself is a large oil producer, but due to refined product needs, regional imbalances, and domestic coastal shipping constraints, the cost of delivering energy to different parts of the country still matters greatly. That means global disruption and domestic shipping restrictions together can create double pressure. The Jones Act waiver should be understood as a response to this double pressure. The White House described this waiver as a way to reduce market disruptions and ease the movement of essential commodities. According to reports, for the next 60 days, foreign flag ships will be allowed to move fuel, natural gas inputs, fertilizer, and some other bulk goods between US ports. The timing is also interesting, because this was not just about consumer gasoline politics. The agricultural season was also approaching. If fertilizer flows are disrupted, the impact reaches the fields. If fuel transport slows down, the impact reaches trucks, refineries, stations, and household budgets. That is why it would be incomplete to see this waiver as just an oil decision. It was a broader logistics easing measure, aimed at breaking some level of market panic. Here, one more important thing needs to be understood. In America, producing crude oil and having lower retail pump prices are not always the same thing. Fuel pricing includes crude cost, refinery capacity, transport cost, taxes, distribution margins, seasonal fuel blends, and local competition. So if the White House gives relaxation in shipping rules, it does not mean that pump prices will dramatically fall the next day. In NPR-linked reporting and AP/Fortune coverage, analysts said that this waiver may make logistics slightly easier, but its impact on gas prices is likely to remain limited. Some estimates suggest relief of only about 3 cents to around 10 cents per gallon, which is very small compared to the overall price surge. That means this step is symbolically big, but not an economic miracle solution. If crude itself is expensive, a global war premium is built into the market, shipping insurance costs have increased, and geopolitical uncertainty continues, then just relaxing domestic maritime restrictions will not eliminate inflation. Yes, it can reduce some regional bottlenecks, make it easier to move spare barrels, increase cargo options from the Gulf Coast to the East Coast or other domestic routes, and reduce the risk of short-term shortages. That is why it is more accurate to call it not a price crash tool, but a pressure relief valve. The broader steps of the Trump administration are also being seen in this larger context. According to reports, along with the Jones Act waiver, a large release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve was announced, with around 172 million barrels of oil expected to be released. According to Reed Smith's analysis and AP coverage, it will take time for this release to be delivered, but the signal was that the White House is telling the market, we are using multiple levers on the supply side. Apart from this, steps like easing Venezuela's sanctions also emerged, with the aim of increasing world oil supply and reducing price pressure. That means the Jones Act waiver was not a standalone decision, it was part of a crisis management package. Even then, this step opened domestic political fault lines. American shipping unions and domestic maritime advocates expressed concern over this waiver, saying it could harm the interests of US mariners, ship owners, and shipyards. Their argument is that whenever a crisis comes and the government allows foreign ships to enter, the commercial viability of the domestic fleet weakens further. They say that if America wants to preserve its long-term maritime capability, then repeatedly weakening the Jones Act in the name of emergency could ultimately become strategic self-harm. That is why this waiver has sparked not just economic debate, but also discussions around labor and sovereignty. On the other hand, refiners, farm-linked industries, and anti-Jones Act voices are calling it a pragmatic move. They argue that when market disruption is extraordinary, rigid shipping protectionism can create artificial scarcity and high costs within the country. According to them, if foreign flagged ships can temporarily transport fuel and fertilizer, both consumers and farmers can get relief. This argument has become stronger, especially because during conflict, logistics flexibility becomes a strategic asset. That means supporters say national interest is not just about domestic shipbuilders, but about the entire economy. Here, a subtle contradiction is also visible. The Jones Act was originally created for national security, but in the 2026 crisis, the same law appeared to some policymakers as an obstacle in the national response. This irony is quite interesting. A century-old law meant for war readiness ended up being temporarily suspended during an actual wartime energy shock. This shows that laws are not static. Their meaning changes with circumstances. What was a protective shield in one era can look like a costly bottleneck in another. The entire controversy around the Jones Act breathes within this tension. The political dimension of Trump's decision is also equally important. Fuel prices in America are not just an economic issue, but a political mood indicator. When pump prices rise, voter frustration rises. Its impact reaches trucking, food delivery, commuting, suburban households, and farm belts. Amid the Middle East war, there was pressure on the White House to show that it is concerned not just about the foreign battlefield, but also about the domestic wallet. The Jones Act waiver was also part of that political messaging. This decision was meant to tell voters that the administration is using every available lever, even if the effect is limited. And from here, a bigger question emerges. Is this just a 60-day story or the beginning of a longer debate on the Jones Act? Because when a law is waived in emergency, critics immediately ask, if the law is so necessary, then why the waiver? And if a waiver can provide relief during a crisis, then why does the law maintain such strict restrictions in normal times? On the other hand, supporters say, an emergency exception does not mean the law itself is wrong. This tug-of-war may intensify further in the coming months, especially if energy prices remain high for a longer period.
Understanding this story from an India or global perspective is also interesting. From the outside, it may look like just an American shipping rule, but in reality, it shows how a global war can shake even domestic laws. Tensions rise in the Middle East, oil flow comes under risk, Brent rises, US gasoline becomes expensive, and then an old US cabotage law becomes a headline. This means that in today's world, energy security, maritime law, military conflict, and household inflation are no longer separate stories. They are so interconnected that tension in Tehran can simultaneously affect a port in Texas, a consumer in Florida, and policy in Washington. If said in very simple terms, the Jones Act is a US law that largely restricts shipping between US ports to vessels that are US built, US owned, US flagged, and US crewed. In March 2026, amid the energy shock and supply disruptions caused by the Iran war, the Trump administration waived it for 60 days so that foreign ships could also carry fuel and key goods on some domestic cargo routes. The aim was to reduce price and supply pressure, but experts believe its impact on pump prices will be limited. That means the headline is very big, the law is very old, but the immediate consumer relief may be small.
If this video has taught you something new, or if you feel this information should reach more people, don't forget to like and share the video. Your small share can become valuable and useful information for someone else. If you have any questions related to this topic, or if you would like to share your opinion with us, be sure to write in the comment box. We read every question and suggestion from you, because your feedback inspires us to create better content. And if you want to keep receiving such interesting and reliable information about business, the economy, and the world in the future, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel GRT Business and also press the bell icon so that you get notifications of every new video directly. At GRT Business, we always strive to provide you with accurate, balanced, and reliable information. Our news and analysis are prepared based on information obtained from various news agencies, public sources, and public opinion. We make every effort to verify and validate each fact as much as possible, but in case of any possible error or dispute, the responsibility lies with the respective sources. Our only aim is to present you with a correct and trustworthy perspective so that you can understand any topic better.